Welcome to Medicine. I'm Dr. Othniel Doolittle here today with a special guest, my father, who's been an ER doctor for many years, decades now, and has built teams around his leadership, his caring, and has now in this stage of life, after building a business, moved into disaster relief and missions. Today, we're going to talk about the leadership lessons he's learned and the things that he's gained from going on mission trips, disaster relief into war zones, natural disaster zones, and how we can care about people. And then he's going to provide some advice for the younger generation. So welcome to Medicine today. Thank you, Dad, for joining me.
My pleasure.
We've had so many great conversations, and you just come away with so many good stories. I just remember the first time you took us on medical missions down in Peru, and it was just so much fun to see you work with the mission team, coordinate the small groups that came in, and set up a clinic for them. That really stuck with me, just how you served and that that was so easy in a way. It felt very easy as a teen to just show up and watch. But you've had so many fascinating stories over the years. What really sticks with you as something interesting that's happened on the mission field?
Wow. So many things over the years, so it's hard to think of one specific thing. But over the years, I think delivering a whole bunch of babies in Sudan was something that if you said to me, do you think you'll ever do that? I would have been like, nah, But every medical mission opportunity has been neat about providing all sorts of interesting stories to come back and tell everybody about.
Yeah. So you're an emergency medicine doc, and you join Samaritan's Purse DART. You fly into Africa because of the Sudan war, and you travel through countries that we didn't even realize were countries.
True.
And you show up in this city that's just overwhelmed with the refugees. How many people were in the city?
So over 1 million people, but the city normally is about 250,000, and it had quadrupled in size just because of the number of refugees that were in the camps surrounding the city at the time.
So their main OB hospital, how were they set up for everything?
There's one OB hospital in that entire city, and that one OB hospital was simply overwhelmed. So we got there and recognized the biggest need that they had was taking care of women and children, but especially laboring patients. So that's what I ended up doing is delivering a lot of babies. We set up a field hospital outside the main OB hospital and simply worked with the overwhelming number of women that were coming in labor. So did lots of labor and delivery, lots of deliveries. We had a general surgeon that did C-sections. We were able to set up a small operating room as one of our tent hospitals that we had. And then we saw tons of women and children with just general medical problems in kind of a primary care clinic situation.
How many deliveries a day were happening?
Between 50 to 100 deliveries a day in the hospital on a regular basis, which was about 4 times what they were normally used to. So we were able to help to facilitate some of those deliveries, and we ended up doing maybe, 20 or 25 deliveries a day in our field hospital. So I was able to deliver about 100 babies myself during the time that I was there, but we also had OB residents from Sudan, and they were super helpful. Some midwives, and then I had some other help for labor and delivery in my team as time went on.
And how busy was the urgent care for the women and children?
It was crazy, just packed. And so because those people had no medical care, they had come from other parts of the country, they didn't have any medical records. A lot of them had been on medicines that they couldn't, get a hold of in the Gudarif area. They were lining up every day early in the morning to be seen, as many as we could see. So initially, we had no cutoff the first few days, and we found that about 4 o'clock in the morning, people started lining up. I think 4:30 in the morning, there was 150 people in a long line. And then they started kind of not fighting, but arguing with each other a little bit of who was supposed to be where and the important people that needed to be seen, who was sickest and all of that. And it was really hard, really complicated to figure out a system of seeing the most needed people at the right time. So we ended up starting to cut it back to initially, I think we saw 200 a day and then 150. And then we realized we had to cut it back even further because we were moving too fast and not seeing the sicker people, instead just seeing too many people. It's a complicated decision of how to deal with triage in those situations. So eventually we're seeing about 100 to 150 patients a day in the clinic area. And that was made up of like 8 beds in one small tent hospital. And in those 8 beds, we would just kind of circulate people through. A lot of it was difficult because of translation. We had great translators, but it just takes longer to see patients.
Sounds busy and exhausting.
It was very tiring. I think that I averaged working about 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. For 6 weeks that I was there, it just didn't stop. I mean, the patients were always there. When you go on these medical mission opportunities, on some of them, especially more recently with the disaster responses, there's really no backup like you're there to work.
So you brought up being an ER doc. What drew you into emergency medicine in the first place? How'd you get there?
I don't know why I wanted to be a doctor, except that I think my parents wanted me to be a doctor and always said that they thought I would be a good doctor for some reason. So early on, I always knew that I wanted to be a doc. And as I grew up, I got involved in emergency medicine early on. When I was 13 or 14, I started volunteering at a local ambulance service. It was just around the corner from our house, so very close. I had been delivering newspapers there because I was a newspaper boy earlier on. And they said, hey, you can do some volunteer work here. That's great. I kind of want to do that because I like medicine. So I started going and helping clean ambulances, doing paperwork, working around the ambulance service. And I think when I was like 15, they actually let me go out on rides. So they trained me enough. I had to do a CPR class, and I would go out with these older people, 15, 16. Maybe the child labor laws were a little bit easier back then than they are now. And then I learned more basic EMS skills, basic medical skills, and how to hold pressure on bleeding patients and splint people with fractures and that. So then over the next couple of years, I continued to be involved in that local ambulance service and realized that I loved this. I loved emergency medicine. I loved going out on rides. I loved the fact that they worked really hard when they were busy and then they had downtime. And during the downtime, we'd sit around and play cards or talk and learned about their lives and all their dramas or whatever else was going on. But I was, going through school at that time, playing soccer, involved in studies and all that, but started to volunteer more and more in the EMS world. So I think from that time, I really knew that I liked emergency medicine better than anything. And then when I got into college, Laterno in Longview, Texas, the college ran the ambulance service for the entire town of Longview. So there I could continue to be involved in EMS, kind of be able to be a paramedic at that time. At the time, the Texas paramedic were divided into different levels. And so it was kind of like a basic paramedic, but we would do some intubations. Back in the days that we used EOAs that nobody's even heard of anymore, where you put a tube in and block the esophagus so that you could breathe into the trachea. The only problem is that once in a while you would intubate somebody with the esophageal tube into the trachea, and that totally blocked the trachea, and then they just died. I mean, that was really bad. And so they realized that this is not a good system, Much better to put an endotracheal tube into the esophagus than to put an esophageal obstructive device into the trachea. And so over time, they realized that. Anyway, so I got involved in EMS, working my way through college, worked a lot of shifts, and more knew that if I got into medicine, if I got accepted into medical school, went through residency, that I would focus on emergency medicine. So that's kind of where I got started in the path. Got into medical school, decided to do a family medicine residency. At that time, emergency medicine was developing. It was getting better, but it wasn't as well known as a field than that it is now. It's kind of different. And in the back of my mind, I really liked people, and I always thought that someday, if I went into emergency medicine, I would want to maybe eventually retire from that and set up a little clinic somewhere and, work as an aging doctor in a small clinic in a mountain town or something like that.
Right.
So family medicine made more sense to me than emergency medicine back then. And it worked out well. Went to the Air Force, came out of there, and then just started practicing emergency medicine since then for the last long time.
Yeah.
So close to 40 years.
That's amazing. When you first came out and were working in ERs, how did you initially see leadership? And then how did you end up getting involved in leadership? Or did your leadership start even earlier than being a doctor?
Yeah, it's a tough question about leadership because I look back and I think, when did I get more involved in leadership? I think probably in medicine itself, my leadership started when I was working in the ambulance service in college. During that time, they recognized that I kind of have a calmer presence and I worked hard, didn't complain much. I liked people and was kind to them. And so for whatever reason, they promoted me up a little bit. So I was able to be like a shift leader, and then I was like the vice president or so. We had a president of the ambulance service, and they made me the vice president to work there on the EMS part. So I think I was developing more leadership skills at that point, and I never thought of it as a specific thing that I had to do with certain objectives to achieve or anything like that. It was more that they gave me the responsibility. I did it and, made the schedules and talked to people if they had a bad case or worked the shifts if they couldn't be filled or whatever. So I think early leadership was just simply walking into something that seemed natural to me that
Right.
I enjoyed.
Makes a lot of sense that it's that natural born leader view of things where there are people that just see problems and they just go out and fix it. Your family culture, your prior training, your mentors are just showing you that if you see something's wrong, you just go work on it. And if there's something hard to do, you just go do it. Then that just opens doors and being willing to talk to people.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way to say it. Back then, I would say also, I don't remember a lot of leadership books or leadership seminars or leadership training. Now we're in a world that we have the advantage of so many great leaders that are out there that have trained really well to be leaders. And they've got all the encouragement and coaching and counseling of how to be a good leader. And all those things I don't think were as present, at least I never was involved in them when I started. So I think if you ask me back then, what does it mean to be a good leader? I would have a really hard time coming up with a clear definition of what that is.
Right.
And for better or worse over the years, I think that I've learned some key things of leadership that I can now go back to and grab a hold of and say, this is a really important part of leadership. A lot of that's been from what I've seen that has failed in leadership, of where it didn't work well. But I still probably hold a little bit more of a vague view of leadership than some people, and that I think the most important point of leadership is just honestly being kind to people, caring about them, being able to think clearly and recognize the way things should run. And then, like you said, just taking the time to make them run better, to say, I'm not going to just passively sit and watch this happen, but we have to do a better job with that. I think I have some, examples over the years, interestingly, of leadership where we're first started this company that we're involved in now 13 years ago. And I remember very early on when I was the medical director of our first hospital, we took over and I started coming in like every other day. I was coming into the hospital. I was meeting with the doctors, meeting with the nurses, meeting with the CEOs, and talking to the people, just making sure that everything was going well. It was a really easy thing to do. It was natural. I enjoyed the people. And I would see problems and say, hey, we got to fix this a little bit better. The x-ray reads are taking way too long. What do we have to do to make that better? How can we fix that and work on that? But I remember one of the doctors early on, and I've told this story before, who said, Dan, you need to stop coming into the hospital so often. He said, this is really bad. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you just set a bad expectation. So when you come in on a regular basis, all that happens is the hospital wants you to come in more and more frequently. They're going to suck the life out of you. They see you coming in regularly, they're going to keep asking you to come in more and more and do more things. You're going to get busier. It's going to take over your life. And his view of leadership was like that. Like, go in when you need to, but don't go in too often. If you go in too often, you're going to get pulled into things that you really don't want to get pulled into. And I get it. It's easy to think like that. I never have. And I think that part of my ability to be a good leader is to not be afraid to go in and get involved. And it was the worst counsel I've ever had that I'm happy I didn't follow, because most of leadership doesn't involve complicated thinking of how I'm going to coach these people the best, coming up with long narratives of what to do, long speeches, and even necessarily as much intentionality, I don't think. It really involves day-to-day discussions with people and taking care of little problems when they're little before they get big. So I was able to go in, and the more involved I was, they didn't expect me to go in and fix everything in the hospital. What they really wanted to know is that, hey, we had a really bad case yesterday, and we think the doc should have done this a little bit differently. And for me to say, yeah, let me look at it and take 5 minutes to review the chart and talk to the doctor and say, yeah, this was all okay. I think they did a good job. And then it's done. It's taken care of. I think that's an important part of leadership. There's lots of important parts of leadership, but the one key one is not to ever just push things aside or say, this is too complicated. I don't want to get involved in that. Or if I get too involved, I'm going to keep getting sucked into it. Instead, we have a lot more time in the day than we think we do, would be my point. And so regardless of what we're doing in leadership, just taking the time to care about people, care about problems, and making sure that we address the little problems before they become big. And so,
yeah, there is, I think, people that are really busy then do worry that they'll get sucked in. You've been good about figuring out delegation and just having those conversations about, like, is this even the right thing for me to fix? That's probably another department, or,
right.
That's not for me to sit here and actually do all the fixing.
Yeah,
but you're there to have the conversation.
Absolutely.
It's definitely something that when you're living in fear, you'll end up not doing the things that are important. When you truly care about people, about your docs or in the ER, you're going to check in on them. You're going to be present.
Yeah.
And that's crucial.
No, absolutely. And the caring part, I think, is probably key above everything else. So I think good leaders really genuinely care about the people that are working for them, and those people know that you care about them. It's absolutely the most important thing. One of our coaches that we use periodically, Laura Shantz, talks about the 4 C's of leadership. And I go back to that because in the past, I wouldn't ever come up with the 4 C's or D's or anything because I don't think like that. I just do it more so.
Yeah.
But it does help sometimes to outline the importance of specific things in leadership or in something that you're working on. But in her 4 C's of leadership that she talks about, the first is caring, and the second is communication or over communication, and then clarity and consistency are the other 2. And over the years, and especially being involved in disaster medicine, I've been able to see more good leaders and more bad leaders. And sometimes with bad leaders, I couldn't quite in the past quantify exactly what it was. What is it about them that isn't going well? Why am I frustrated with them as a leader? And I think that in some ways, having this itemized a little bit in my brain helps me now to look at it and say, in medical missions, for example, segueing back to that, caring, most of the leaders that I've been involved with are very caring and really good about that. And I would say that that's the number one thing. So ultimately, do you really care about the people that are under you? Do you really want what's best for them? The communication, they do okay in medical missions, I found, but making sure that you over communicate with people, and we hear that a lot, but it is so super important to make sure that you're responding to them. I hear what you're saying, or am I hearing you say, that this is what you're thinking? You're frustrated because the shifts are too long. What would make that better? Communicating with a doctor, for example. But I think the things that really now are easy for me to point out that don't always happen in a company like ours, or in an emergency department, or in a home, or on a medical mission field, are probably the clarity and consistency. And that's so important. I tell people that doctors will follow you if they're really clear as to your expectations, and they will be super frustrated and not follow you if they're not clear about it. If they don't really know what they're supposed to do, they're going to have a hard time following you. So I think that clarity is really important. We are going into this hospital in this new contract, and the clarity is that we need to fix the following problems. These are the key things that we have to do better at. So we clarify with our doctors, we clarify with our administrative personnel, this is what we really want to tackle. And it's important to do that. If you don't clarify why you're on a medical mission field, why you're in a country, why are we in Sudan? What are we doing in Sudan? I mean, this is the middle of Africa. Help me to understand how this impacts hardly anybody for a longer period of time. Help me to understand, what we're trying to achieve into the future. Give me that clarity as a follower. I'm not a leader in that situation, or I wasn't, but I need to know that. If I know it, then I'm all in. I can jump in. So clarity is super important. And then consistency is so important in leadership. You can't one day say, we're going to do things this way, and then the next day change it, unless you have a good reason to change it. But
unless there's clarity about the inconsistency.
Clarity about the inconsistency, yeah, exactly.
And you're communicating and over-communicating.
Exactly, yeah.
What else have you learned on the mission field that's changed your leadership's perspective, other than the 4 C's, that you'd bring back into emergency medicine?
There are a couple of key things. Here's one. I tend to be pretty gracious with people overall. My nature has always been to be fairly optimistic and positive. But I do find that when I get tired and when I'm working a lot of shifts or long shifts, that I'm much less tolerant than I realize. And I think one of the things that I've brought back is that people in general, I still stick with my positive worldview, in my rose-colored glasses, that people in general want to do a good job. And oftentimes we don't give people as much credit as we should. And I think on my first disaster trip, I went to the island of Karaku that was hit by a storm and destroyed the island. But as we were flying on this plane over to Grenada, I was with 3 people that sat in my row with me. And I looked at them And one guy was like 70 years old, and the other was a lady that was like 72 years old. And my initial impression of these people were like, I don't know if I can work with these people. Like, what are they bringing into this situation, this disaster? How can I work with these people? And at the end of like 6 weeks working with these people, and it goes on, there was a group of other people that were there. I was very critical of everybody around me. It was amazing. And I realized, I looked at myself and I was like, I can't believe I was that critical of everyone. Like I would tell someone how to do something and they wouldn't do it right. But after 6 weeks, I walked away saying they are the most amazing people I ever worked with. And I looked back and I was like, they were so hardworking. You know, these people that sometimes are older people that are retired. We have a whole bunch of young people in these disasters, but there are some older ones that are retired. And it's easy to think, well, boy, they're kind of weak, you know, they can't hold up their own. And they end up being the most amazing people, long-suffering, tolerant of others, encouraging of others. They want to do what's best for people. Like none of them, especially in medical missions, none of them are there for their own good, for their own selfish interests. You know, they all want to bring transformative peace of Christ, as we do in our company. They want to bring it to the mission field, to the people around them. And I didn't give them enough credit when I started. And now that I've been on several of these, I go into it even more tolerant of people just saying, they're good people. You know, they might need some better skills. They might need a little better training. Even the leaders need some better leadership training. But overall, their hearts are good. They're in it. They want to do the right thing. And I would say that applying that to emergency medicine, working at hospitals, easy to get frustrated with a nurse because they're not keeping up or because they didn't follow your order exactly or whatever. But at the end of the day, I would say most of them are good people. Most of them want to do the right thing. They want to please. They want to take care of the patients. My providers are that way. The administrators are that way. That the vast majority of them really want to do the right thing. They're not out there to make your life miserable or to destroy everything that you're trying to do.
Right.
They actually care about people. So
that makes a lot of sense. And we see that in patients as well. So often that you walk in and you have one view of them and then you start talking with them and you're like, yeah, shouldn't have judged a book by their cover.
Yeah. Well, we have so many examples of that over the years. I know you and I have talked about it, and a patient that I went into that said they weren't on any narcotics. And I looked up their schedule of medications and it said that like 2 weeks before they got 240 codeine, it said. And I was like, you just got narcotics, you know, like 2 weeks ago and you lied to me. And I was just so mad and accusatory. And they said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never been on it. And so we started talking and I looked back and found old records, you know, from a few weeks ago. And it said they got 240 cc's of codeine elixir for a cough that they had. And they're like, oh yeah, the doctor did give me that. I took 1 teaspoon. I never used it after that. And here in my mind, I just never gave them the benefit of the doubt. You know, I just assumed that they were narcotic seeking, lying patient. So over the years, like you said, even patients, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt most of the time. Trust them unless they give you a reason not to.
It's humbling.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah. We're not always the best at judging. And so we need to be careful. We are.
True.
So all through both the ER years and now in medical missions, disaster relief, what advice would you give to younger ER docs as they're bringing up families? Because you did raise up a family during that time. What are some crucial things that you advise a doc to be a good dad and a good ER doc?
Another great question. And I would say that I can speak in terms of what I think I've done well with and at times not so well with. And my advice to younger doctors growing up, I think, first of all, is to not work too much. And I've talked to many of my providers about that. I think it's gotten easier for a lot of doctors overall. They nowadays, in general, come out of residencies with lower expectations from the institutions they work for or the employers that they work for. The expectations are more for a shorter number of shifts, less hours, and a really good work-life balance. So that's probably the key word, that work-life balance. And that's always a difficult term to delineate or to objectify, so to speak. But I think that I came out with working a little bit too much. At the same time, I always emphasize the importance of enjoying my time off a lot. So I would just tell younger doctors, make sure that you do have a good work-life balance. From the beginning, make sure that you're just not killing yourself, working tons of hours and ignoring the time that you have with your family. I think a lot of docs do well with that these days. And I think that that's really good. I think along with that is emphasizing doing something that you really enjoy doing outside of work. I remember one of my earliest mentors, a general surgeon that I worked with in medical school, said, you really should read at least an hour every day. He was convinced. I don't think everybody has to do that, but his point was, even as a really busy general surgeon, that he always took 1 hour a day to sit up at night and read a novel, read something. Other doctors that I think have done really well in their work-life balance and in enjoying life in general have developed other skills like linguistics or musical skills or something like that. But it's super important to not just be focused on your work so much that you never develop anything outside of that. We've talked about over the years, if a college student comes to me and says, hey, I just started college, I want to go to medical school, what should I study? And I say music or, literature or a foreign language. And they say, well, how about chemistry or biology? I was like, nah. Whatever you do, don't do that, because you're going to learn all that. You're going to get that. You're going to get everything you need in college in a pre-med program without that being your major. So you'll get all basic sciences and your biology and physiology and whatever else. And then you're going to learn in medical school, it's all about medicine for 4 years. That's all you do. So in college, focus on something else that you can do in life and really enjoy. So become a piano performance major or Spanish, linguistics major or whatever, but do something, or business, I think is huge, but anything that's not directly science related. And my point is more so for telling a young doctor that's considering going to medical school or someone coming just out of medical school is to keep that focus on the things that they really enjoy in life, their hobbies and such. As far as being a good father and being a good parent, I've always said that time with your kids is the most important thing. So my wife doesn't 100% always agree with this quantity over quality, but my point is not that quality isn't important, but that quantity is more important. And I think that more is caught than taught, we say. And so kids catch from you the way you handle situations. When you're building that tree fort and you hit your finger, how do you react to that? And what do you say? And what's your perspective? And so they can only learn that if they're with you and around you and see how you behave around other people. How do you interact with other people? Do you care about them or not? All those things. So being a good father and a good leader is just allowing your kids to be involved in your life a bit, spending time with them and focusing on that.
That's amazing advice.
Yeah.
The time, the work-life balance. You already brought up one of the things that I had a question about was just what are you not getting taught in medical school that you think is important? You brought up business. You brought up the extra hobbies and things that are important to continue to do. Because while we love medicine and while it is often a calling, we care about people enough, we enjoy the medical aspect, that there are other things that enliven the other part of our brain and help us to grow.
I think so. And like I said, business is a huge one, and I could go on for a long time about that, which I won't, but it's realizing more and more doctors that I see over the years that as they are involved in medicine, they're making great money and they're having families, and they're buying houses, and they're doing all these things. And it's just shocking that they get to an age where a lot of people would retire and they simply can't retire. And some of it is just spending more than they have. Some of it is just bad business, like not knowing how to invest or not making good decisions of investment, or, not putting enough money aside on a regular basis, putting money aside on a regular basis, planning for the future, all of those things. So I think any business acumen and discipline that young doctors can learn and practice will carry on to the future so much, not just for them, but for their kids and grandchildren. As physicians, we're in a unique business where we can frequently in emergency medicine earn whatever we want to. It just depends how much we work. And so we can just pick up another shift and make more money. And we get in this mindset that money is really easy to get, which it is at times as an ER doctor. It just is. But it's also easy to spend. And it also teaches our kids sometimes a part of the world that's skewed. Like most people don't live that way. Farmers don't just decide when they want to earn money or not earn money. Or if you work every day as a manager of a restaurant, you don't just decide when you want to make money or not money. You just have to work every day and be disciplined. So you want to teach your kids that my life is wonderful. I can make as much money as I want to just by working more. I can take vacations almost as much as I want to just by giving notice that, hey, next month I'm going to go ski in Switzerland for 2 weeks. And we have all these amazing abilities as an ER doctor that drew me into emergency medicine, which make me say that I would never go into anything else. It's phenomenal that we can work hard and play hard like no one else can. We just can't. And I don't know of any other field that people can do that in. I really don't. You have to think very hard. But the bad part is for our kids, if they grow up seeing that, then they can come away with not the exact best discipline for them in their life. So you have to somehow teach them the importance of managing money well, being efficient in what they do, setting money aside early on, developing those important things that they'll need to lead their family, especially if they don't become ER docs.
Right.
So
I never thought about that difference between how ER doctors make money with our time is often just direct opposite of almost every other job out there.
right.
Sometimes business, you can hustle and create more product, content, whatever. And so time creates money.
Yeah,
But sometimes that's speculative money.
it is. It's not a short.
Right.
Like for us, we know.
Right. You're
Pick
going to get
another
the
shift,
check.
we're going to get that check because we do every time, But it is really a unique thing to be a contractor, Perhaps there are other jobs that are contractor type jobs that pay like that, but not with the amount of certainty that we enjoy.
Great advice, and I appreciate it a lot. Thanks for joining me today and imparting a bunch of wisdom. And we'll probably hit you up a little bit more to hear more about disaster relief and how you get involved in disaster medicine. And I loved just hearing about leadership and your experience over the years, because you've done a lot of things. One of the things that is crucial is that the older generation teaching the younger generation. And you talked about those 70-year-olds on your trips. They have been on quite a few trips and disaster relief missions. And so they know what works and doesn't work because they've seen a lot. And that's so important. So I really appreciate you taking the time to teach the younger generation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it'd be fun to talk more about disaster relief in itself and the neat opportunity that it is, especially for emergency medicine doctors.
Dad, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. Thank you all for joining us. If you found this interesting, we'd love if you'd like, subscribe, share. Send us some comments. What else do you want to know about disaster medicine? What other things should we be asking of the older generation to teach us how to be better doctors and better leaders? Thank you so much, and welcome to medicine.